Alright, CNT120, Chapter 5. We're in the last section here of fiber optic. So our Ethernet standards for fiber optic. Okay, these can be relatively easy again if I kind of slow down and look for a couple key items. The first part's going to let me know bandwidth. Next to that, as we said before, base is baseband. Okay, so baseband right there, baseband. That lets us know one signal at a time. Okay. The third part, like the SX or the LX here, this actually gives us a clue as to the wavelength being used, and the wavelength gives us a clue as to distance. Okay, it gives us a clue to distance. So if I have S for short wavelength, it's going to go a short distance. If I see L, it's a longer wavelength. It can go a longer distance. Okay, so a lot of this gets a lot easier if I look for a couple of those clues. So let's look down through these. Here we go. First one, 100 base SX. Okay, our 100 base, that's fast Ethernet, if you will, fast Ethernet fiber optic. These are pretty outdated because if we have any fiber optic connections, we're probably up in the 10 gig or 40 gig range, if you will. So these are kind of outdated, but we'll look at them real quickly. With 100 base SX, we have 100 megabit baseband, S for short wavelength. So I'm going to have the short wavelength is 850 nanometers. Short wavelength is going to go short distance. So as you see here, we're going 100 meg up to about 300 meters using multi-mode fiber. My FX, which we actually had some media converters on quite a few years ago that ran FX. So yeah, it's one of those, it's not in the dinosaur ages, but it is outdated. So 100 base FX, again 100 megabits, we can go up to about 200 meters because we have a longer wavelength. It's actually a 1310 nanometer. The longer the wavelength, the longer the distance. So 1310 nanometer, we can go greater distances, so up to about 2 kilometers with multi-mode fiber. Go about 2 kilometers with multi-mode fiber. All right, now into things that are a little bit more current that you might actually run into. 1000 base SX, we have a gigabit. 1000 base SX gigabit short wavelength. So we can go 1000 meg up to 550 meters using multi-mode fiber because we're using a short wavelength, 850 nanometer. That's what the SX is actually indicating, short wavelength, which is 850. The LX, 1000 base LX, gigabit, we can go, well, if we're going to use multi-mode, we can go 550 meters. If we can use single mode, we can go 5,000 meters because we're using a longer wavelength, 1310 nanometers. 1310 nanometers, I can go longer wavelength, I can go longer distance. So I can get up to 5 kilometers now using single mode with my gig link, which again, once upon a time when you were doing 10 meg or 100 meg twisted pair connections to a desktop, having a gig go a good distance between buildings was very valuable, very valuable. More modern kind of connections that you would see, because we're probably running gigabit to the desktop, so we're probably running a 10 gig link between our switches. So 10G base SR, 10 gig base SR, we have 10 gig bandwidth. Short wavelength, S short wavelength, so 850 nanometers again. So we can go up to about 300 meters using multi-mode fiber. So this would be really adequate in a building to connect closets together. Connecting closets on one end of the building to the other end of the building, using a 10 gig link, 300 meters, very valuable, very useful today. The other one here, 10 gig base LR, longer wavelength. So we can go a longer distance. So 10 gig, long wavelength, I can go, I'm using 1310 nanometer wavelength over single mode fiber. I can now go 10 kilometers, 10 kilometers. So in a situation like that, I like to pick on a large campus like Penn State University Park main campus. If I'm trying to connect across campus, I might need a couple kilometer link to connect a building on one side of campus to a building on the other side of campus. It is very possible. So I could use a 10 gig base LR connection to do so. Now, how does this apply for me, or how is this useful for me? Well, let me zoom back here real quickly to our SFPs. If I have a switch, when I buy an SFP and slide it in, that SFP I buy will allow me to do 10 gig base SR or 10 gig base LR by the SFP I buy. So let me zoom down here now. I have an example of a 10 gig base SR SFP module that would slide into my switch. This right here would give me a 10 gig link using 850 nanometers, about a 500 meter link between switches. Actually, I think it's like 300 meters between switches. That's about a $850 module. They're not cheap, and I would need two. I would need one on each end of that link, but that would give me that a couple 100 meter link between closets, 10 gig fiber optic, couple 100 meter link between closets in my building. I could take my same switches and replace that module to an LR, and now I could go a couple kilometers to connect buildings across a campus. Obviously, the price is going to go up. And actually, if I check next week or the following week or the following week or the following week, these prices are going to fluctuate. But it gives you a quick idea that, I'm going to pay more for the optics in this to do this, but I don't need to do anything else different. I don't need to throw my switches out and buy a new switch. That's why they developed these. So it is kind of handy to be able to pull one module out, put another one in, and change its capabilities. So that's where this can come in handy for you. That's where these standards can come in handy for you to know, what do I need to connect? Or if I look at a module in there, what is it capable of connecting? What am I able to do with it? So that's where they come in handy for you. All right, let's look at some common transmission flaws. I could have a fiber type mismatch. Yeah, if I mismatch my fiber type, single mode, multi-mode, it's not going to work. I have a multi-mode signal trying to get all of that nice big core, trying to get all of its light into that teeny tiny single mode core. It's not going to work. Okay, I could even have a wavelength mismatch, doing the multi-mode single mode or changing the modules on the end. If I change those modules, SR to LR, changing that wavelength, it's not going to work. That's like using a different color flashlight. If I'm using a regular flashlight and all of a sudden I use a red flashlight, my ability to see things is going to change. So here's some reminders about, fiber optic jackets are usually color-coded to help you know. And also the fiber connectors are color-coded to let you know. Those connector boots are there to let you know. A lot of the ones we terminate in our lab room are these beige connectors here, because they're multi-mode fiber connectors. Other common problems, dirty connectors. I can get signal loss because of dirt on the end of the connector, and I can't just go and blow on it and wipe it on my shirt. It doesn't work that way. I actually need to use a lint-free cleaning wipe to clean those off. They actually make gadgets to do so. There's a gadget there to do so as well. We'll come back in the last podcast and talk troubleshooting tools.